Trev, talk to me about free will. Do people actually have free will? I mean, we just talked about salvation, God choosing people who are going to be saved. What does that mean for free will? Does somebody actually have the ability to really choose something?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that there's kind of some nuances that have to take place within the conversation, because what we were talking about previously is really specifically within the boundaries of salvation, right?
Yeah.
Which is a decision to either choose or to not choose to receive Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
And I think that what we see scripturally is that's something that we're actually not able to do apart from God first intervening in our life. That being said, I wouldn't say that we're not able to actually make choices outside of the boundaries of that. And so we really do have free will. We really do have the ability to make choices in our lives. One of the interesting things we see about that, though, is we're not free to just choose anything, because one of the things the Bible talks about is that as a result of the fall and sin, we make decisions that we wish we wouldn't make all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that plays into it.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Edwards talks a little bit about this when he, his book, is The Freedom of the Will, The Bondage of the Will? I think The Freedom of the Will is...
The other one's Luther.
Yeah, the other one's Luther. He makes this whole argument that you are not necessarily free to want what you want. Like, as humans, we cannot will ourselves to want whatever we want. Does that make sense? I mean, this is the plot of every romantic comedy. Like, the person is not able to make themselves love somebody. Your will is actually constrained by other things. And so let me just raise the question as Paul talks about it here. In Romans chapter 9, he says, for the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I've raised you up, that I might show my power in you, that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So then, this is Paul's conclusion, so then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. Here's the question he anticipates. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? I mean, this is the crux of the conversation, right? Like, if God is actually determining things, he's hardening people and their response to him, why does God still find fault in anybody? How is that fair?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because I think a lot of times when we come to this, the way that we have a tendency to frame the equation, or the way that we would feel would be fair, is that everyone should at least deserve the chance for mercy, the chance to either receive it or reject it. One of the things we see with Romans 9, as well as other passages in the Bible, is that actually fairness, that everyone having the chance to receive mercy, isn't actually something the Bible affirms as fair, because the reality is we don't deserve the chance for mercy. What we actually deserve is judgment. Yeah. And so to even that anyone receives mercy, that in and of itself means we're not receiving what we actually have deserved. Yeah. And so it really paints a picture of God that's more merciful than anything. If I could say one other thing about it, I think sometimes too we have a tendency to approach this subject with there's a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings that get wrapped up in it, because we have loved ones in our lives who we want to come to faith, that we care for deeply, and for whatever reason haven't made that decision to trust in Jesus. And so it leads us to want mercy for them and want God to work and stir in their life to bring them into a relationship with him. And it leads us to want mercy for everyone. But I think if we do broaden the conversation just a little bit, we see that we actually don't want just mercy, but that there's all kinds of things we experience in life that actually lead us to cry out for justice as well. And so we really do want mercy, and we really do want justice. Yeah. The trouble is sometimes we disagree with how God chooses to distribute those. I think sometimes we'd rather that he wouldn't make those choices at all. And I think sometimes a way to think about that is in wanting God to not make those decisions, to not choose those distributions. I think sometimes what we're doing is we're actually getting to a place where we think we can understand mercy and justice better than actually God does, which falls in line with Paul's response to the question, is that you're not the creator, you're the creature, and God's ways aren't our ways. Yeah,
I think it kind of comes to a head, this conversation where, Paul he's asking that question in Romans chapter 9, how can God still find fault? Who can resist his will? He's setting up this great question, and ultimately his response is, who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to the molder, why have you made me like this? And so in Romans chapter 9, Paul doesn't give us a great
No,
He doesn't
it's not
tie the bow.
satisfying.
Yeah. There's still an element of mystery to salvation. And I think, whenever we enter these conversations, they're good, they're helpful, and we should want to know what the scriptures teach about these things. We do it with open hands and with humility. Theology is always to be done in humility.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, I think Paul intentionally frames this with his own personal tension and wrestling with it at the beginning of 9 and at the beginning of 10. And so, he affirms this to be true. He holds it to be true. But at the same time, he frames it in such a way that he makes it very clear that there's tension with this for him and that there is a difficulty personally, but he doesn't allow the difficulty to change what he knows to be true. Yeah.
So you got to answer the question, do we have free will?
Again, I think it's complicated. There's so many different contexts.
Yeah.
I would say yes in so many contexts, but also not complete freedom of the will, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. There's a mystery. God's human responsibility and God's sovereignty and how these things fit together. We think that is just a point of mystery that one day we'll be able to have clarity, Lord willing, on that.
Yeah.